All right. And we are live. All right. So my name is Chris Berry. We do these webinars every week at 1 o'clock every Wednesday. We call them Wisdom Wednesday webinars. A lot of W's, alliteration. It's kind of fun. And really, it's all about just answering your questions. So there's a reminder email that goes out. If you have questions, you can submit them ahead of time. Or if you're listening right now, you can log in to the Q&A section. Just hit that button or in the chat, and you can put in whatever questions you have into the chat or a question and answer section. These are unscripted. There's no PowerPoint. I'm not covering any specific topics. It's really just geared towards providing education, answering questions, talking about kind of what's going on in the world each week, and really enjoy them. And let me start by sharing my screen. And always when we do this, I like to start with a positive focus, just something positive that happened over the past week or so, or since we've had our last event. And my iPad is not sharing very well right now. Let's see. Goodness. Let me try doing it another way. Anyways, my positive focus, I'm going to turn off video for a second and try to find a cord to hook this up. My positive focus is that my mother-in-law actually went into the hospital. A little bit of a medical issue, at stage 2 cancer, but she's doing pretty darn well, and hopefully will be coming home within the next day or so. So always concerning when you have a loved one needing care, but she appears to be doing about as well as she can. And so we're happy that she might be coming home soon. All right, let me see if I can share my screen now. Zoom's making me install another plugin, which is always fun. There we go. And there we go. Now we should be seeing my screen. There we go. All right. Now we're going. All right. So again, if you do have any questions, please put them into the chat. I've had a couple people, or the Q&A section, I've had a couple people submit some questions ahead of time, as well as we're logging on. This is general information. So if you want to see how this applies to your own specific situation, as always, book some time on the calendar and then we will see how this applies to your situation. And again, just like last week, if you haven't, I'm going to put a link right into the chat so everyone can see. If you like this webinar and you're happy with it and you found it valuable, could just leave us some feedback. And especially if you're on a computer and just flip on your camera, a little video would be great as well. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So we had 2 questions submitted ahead of time, plus a couple of questions that came in. So I'll make sure to answer those questions that just came in. But first, the questions that were submitted ahead of time. So what are some ways to provide for my grandchildren as part of my estate plan? So this is a question that was submitted, and it's a question that I get asked kind of quite often. So a lot of times around retirement age, our kids will be adults, and now we have grandchildren coming into the picture. And the question is, do I provide for my kids or my grandchildren? How do I incorporate them? I don't want them to feel left out. There's different ways to do it. And so one way is we can just do like a specific gift of a dollar amount. So let's say you have 3 kids, you say everything goes to my 3 kids, but right off the top, you want maybe, I'm just making up numbers, like $10,000 to go to each grandchild, right? So it's nice because you're picking the dollar amount, you know exactly what's going there. one concern I have whenever we say like specific dollar amounts is we don't know how much money is going to be left over at the end of the day. So you might be maybe giving too much to the grandkids versus your children. Another option is we give a percentage. So it's not uncommon to say, all right, you know what, I want 90% of whatever's left over upon my death to go to the kids, and then maybe 10% to then go to, we call it living grandchildren. Just the idea that we look to the number of grandchildren we have at the time of death, and then we can split it up evenly amongst the named grandchildren. And typically we build in language to say that we have this underage language that we typically build into our estate plans and trusts to say that if they're less than 25, it's going to be held in trust, and the trustee would manage it to pay for their school or college or braces or support, whatever it may be. And then once they reach 25, then maybe they can inherit that money outright. So those are kind of the two standard ways we either carve out a percentage or we make specific gifts. And then I was having this conversation with a client recently, and here's kind of an outside the box approach with idea of leaving a legacy and making sure that you're remembered. So it's nice to kind of leave a chunk of change to the grandkids, but this is kind of a cool idea. All right, so let's say we have Jim, and let's say Jim is 70. All right, and let's say there's a grandchild we want to provide for. I'll just take my daughter's name. My dad's name's Jim, actually, so maybe I'm making this recommendation, my dad. And we'll take my daughter, Maddie. And let's say Maddie's 8, which she is. She has a soccer game tonight that I'm coaching, so wish us luck on our soccer game. We only have 2 left. It's been a great season coaching. But what we could do is Jim could set up, and we're going to talk about like an insurance product. Jim, let's say he has a chunk of money that he doesn't necessarily need right now. And I'm just making up numbers. So let's say he has $100,000. Well, what he could do is turn that into a fixed index annuity that offers income for the rest of his life, but it could be tied to Maddie's life as well. And so now that $100,000 could be, and I'm just making up numbers here. I really have no idea just off the top of my head what the numbers would look like. But it could be a $2,000 check per year for the rest of Jim's life, but then also it could be tied to Maddie's life as well. And so when Jim passes away, Maddie will continue to get this $2,000 check that could arrive every year, say on her birthday. And it could be coming from Grandpa Jim. And so it's kind of a cool way to stay in front of or make sure that they remember you. So every year for the rest of Maddie's life, she could get a check coming from Grandpa Jim. And I just thought it's kind of a cool way to be remembered. So it's a little of an outside the box idea. And all you do is we attach, a lot of times when we're talking about income planning, we think of husband and wife, but we could also think of income planning as like adding a grandchild. Now, granted, the income coming to Jim, it's going to be a lot less because of the young age of Maddie, but still, it's a way to create every year on Maddie's birthday, she's going to get a check from her grandfather who passed away. So just kind of like an outside the box idea to make sure that you're remembered, that you're not forgotten. And that was really the genesis of this question, is they wanted to make sure that the grandchildren didn't feel left out. God forbid, our clients passed away. So with regards to estate planning, a lot of times we're looking at either leaving a specific dollar amount as part of the estate plan, which typically I'm not in huge favor of, just because unless it's a small or nominal amount, just because we don't know the overall value. Like right now, we might have $1 million, and okay, we say leave 10,000, but if we spend down this money and now there's only say $100,000 left upon death, that $10,000 is a bigger percentage. I would say more of my clients pick some type of percentage that they leave to the grandkids as part of the estate plan. It's not uncommon for 10% split up amongst the living beneficiaries. But this is also an outside the box idea. Someone just kind of wrote in, what about education savings plans? Yeah, that's another good idea, like contributing to things like 529s, which have to be used for education. That's a good idea as well. But yeah, so there's different ways to do it depending on kind of what your goals are. A couple more questions coming in. I answered that. All right. This next one. What should I do to protect my rental properties? And really, not just rental properties, but any second or more pieces of real estate. So your primary residence, you would never look at putting your primary residence in an LLC because that's uncaps it for business purposes or uncaps it for property tax purposes. And that's just a huge mistake. We don't want to put our primary residence into an LLC. But rental properties or any other second piece of real estate, it probably makes sense to look at some type of legal structure to protect it. Because we consider second pieces of real estate, we consider them like hot assets. Like you never know when you might have a slip and fall, especially if it's a rental or if you own property up north. Someone might go hunting on that property and then they're injured and now they could potentially sue you. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but those things happen. So the concern is you have your money and your stuff and your primary residence here, but if you have this kind of hot asset, you don't want all of this because someone sues you because they had a slip and fall on that second piece of property. You don't want that to spill over to your other assets. So that's why a lot of times what we're doing is we want to wrap this hot asset into, like put it in its own little box, limit the liability. So that's what a LLC is a limited liability company. So now if there is a slip and fall or you get sued because of the second piece of property, all they can take is what's inside the LLC because you built this box around it. You've limited the liability, hence the LLC. So a lot of times whenever we have rental properties or second pieces of real estate, we'll do at least one LLC. Now, let's say you have multiple rentals or multiple properties. You're going to have a choice to make. You could put all of these inside of one LLC. Now that limits liability, so now they can't come after you individually. But the problem is if something happens to one of these properties, it could spill over to the other properties, right? And so that's where maybe, depending on the situation and the value of the different accounts, we might have a series of LLCs where each property is now wrapped inside of its own protective wrapper. So that's why a lot of times we'll do real estate LLCs when we have second pieces of property. And again, you can't do this with your primary residence because it would uncap it for property tax purposes. You'd lose the homestead exemption, et cetera. Now, that's not the whole story because the concern is what happens if you were sued because you get like in a car accident, right? So it's your own issues. This isn't, you're not sued because of this hot asset. You're sued because kind of life threw you individually a curveball, or what happens if you need long-term care, which could run $8,000 to $12,000 per month, right? Well, if you're the owner of these LLCs, they can come after that LLC. It's not protected. So LLCs protect whatever's inside of the LLC from spilling over to your personal assets, but an LLC does not protect that asset from your own issues, whether it's the devastating cost of nursing home care, or if you were in a car accident or you hit someone with your car, they can come after that LLC. They can come after you. Like an LLC, it's no different than owning like Coca-Cola stock, or for my business owners, if they own the LLC in their name, or the S Corp or the C Corp, or they have shares of stock in their name, and you would need nursing home care, or you were to get in a car accident and you're sued, they can come after not only you individually, but also the LLC and everything that you own. So that's why a lot of times what we're doing is not only are we wrapping these hot assets inside of the box of the LLC, but then we want to remove them from your name. And that's where we take things like your primary residence, some of your assets, we put these LLCs, and then we put it into an asset protection trust like a castle trust. So now we have your money, we have your primary residence, we have your LLCs, your business interests, all within the trust. So now if you were to need any of these things and they try to come after you, well, whatever's inside of the trust would be shielded from creditors, shielded from long-term care costs. So if these catastrophes of, say, a lawsuit, long-term care costs were to come after you individually, it would be stopped because it's not in your name, but instead it's in the asset protection trust. So it's kind of a complicated concept. Is it understand there's two forms of two directions of liability. One, we want to protect against the liability of those hot assets, like a business, of a rental property, of a second piece of property. We don't want that to spill over onto you. And likewise, we don't want your issues to spill over onto your assets. So that's why a lot of times we're not only doing an LLC, but we're also doing an asset protection trust. And again, that would be only if you're concerned about things like creditors, lawsuits, or potential long-term care costs. So I'm not saying everyone needs an asset protection trust or LLC. I'm just saying if those are your concerns, or if you have second pieces of property, you need to think about how do you manage or hold those assets. Okay. So yeah, hopefully that was helpful, talking about rental property, second pieces of property, properties, LLCs, and trusts. All right. So we had a couple of questions. So that was all for the questions submitted via email ahead of time. Now we had a couple of questions come in here. Let me go through these. So our third question here, is it safe to gift assets? So we're gifting assets, I guess specifically stocks. Looks like we want to gift these to an LLC. So kind of timely that I was talking about LLCs. Without risking having the entire LLC value included in your estate. So we're talking about estate taxes. So otherwise known as your death tax. And with this LLC, we have split ownership of 10%, and I've gifted 90% to two beneficiaries. And I understand I'm a much better attorney and advisor than I am an artist, especially as I'm doing this on the fly, so don't judge my artwork. My daughter's artwork and son's artwork is much better than mine. So the question is it still safe to gift assets to an LLC without risking having the entire LLC value later included in your estate, even though you maintain a 10% interest and have gifted 90% to two beneficiaries? Okay, so first we need to talk about the estate taxes, and then we need to talk about the situation. So the way estate taxes work, right now you have a $11 million estate tax exemption, meaning as long as you die with less than $11 million, you owe zero in estate taxes. Now you might still have income tax or capital gains. Like if you have a lot of pre-tax IRAs, that's another conversation. And we've been really banging the drum on moving money out of these IRAs, paying the taxes because we know taxes are going up. But that's another conversation. What we're talking about is this death tax, is that when you pass away, right now they give you $11 million. Think of it as a coupon, meaning as long as you die with less than $11 million, you owe zero in estate taxes. So, and we've talked about this a little bit, and this is one of the, I guess, you have a window of opportunity to take advantage of this strategy right now. So let's say we have $9 million of assets, okay? So right now that's under that $11 million cap, and you'd say, hey, right now I don't have an estate tax issue. But what's happening is that when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expires, so the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act runs from 2018, and the way it's scheduled to run is that it is sunsets or is over in 2025. What happens is this is dropping down to $5 million. And then we have the Biden proposal. President Biden has proposed lowering it even further to now $3.5 million. Okay. We don't know if this will go through. It might just be a bargaining chip, but we know as of right now, at least the way that tax laws work, we know that either 2025, if not sooner, the state tax exemption is dropping to 5 million. So one of the strategies is to say, okay, you know what? And we actually got a private, not me personally, we got a private letter ruling from the IRS to say that this is available. Is what we can do is we can move or gift because of what's called the unified credit. And what the unified credit says is that this is a death plus lifetime gift tax exemption. So you can give $15,000 a year without filling out a gift tax form to as many people as you want. But if you give more than that, then you cut into your unified credit, which is right now $11 million. So the issue or the question was, if we were to gift, say, and I'm just making up numbers right now, but say $4 million out of our estate right now, and then the estate tax exemption drops to 5 million, is this 4 million protected? And the answer is yes. So we've gifted it out of our estate, and now it's estate tax free. And there's different mechanisms that we can utilize to do this. We could do an outright gift. We could, but then you're losing control. There's no asset protection. Really, there's kind of three strategies. One is an outright gift. So you could just gift stock outright to the kids. Second option would be through an LLC. We could still maintain some control. And third option is through the trust. So just like when we're talking about income tax planning, it's kind of a two-step process. First step is how much to move. And the second step is where do we move it? So we could gift, if we have a $9 million estate, we could move 4 million out of the estate now via gifts. And then it's just, do we want to do an outright gift? Do we want to gift it to an LLC, or do we want to gift it to a trust? So that's kind of an overview of one estate tax planning strategy that we have to utilize before these estate taxes drop down. Okay. So the question is, can I gift this stock to an LLC? And in terms of my estate now, I just have 10% and they maybe have 90%. Yeah, if you structure it correctly, then this is certainly a viable strategy. So a little bit complicated, doesn't affect everyone because it only affects people who might have estate tax issues. But hopefully that was helpful, and more than happy to sit down and kind of dig into that a little more. All right, other questions. Should a ladybird real estate be in a trust? With regards to real estate, so whenever we're talking about like homes and second pieces of property, really we're only doing two things, like 95% of the time. So one is we do what we call a ladybird deed. Really what this is just a beneficiary designation for the home, to say that if you or you and your spouse were to pass away, it goes to whoever we've listed as a beneficiary on that deed. The technical term of this, a lot of people call it a ladybird deed, named after Lady Bird Johnson. There was a law professor that wrote a book on different types of deeds and named each type of deed after a celebrity. That's where the ladybird deed came from. Really what this is called is, technical term is an enhanced life estate deed. So you can sell it, you can refinance, you can do whatever you want. And typically, and then upon death, then it flows into the trust or goes to whoever the beneficiary is. So typically we're doing this when we do a revocable living trust or a will-based estate plan. Okay. Now the second option would be deeding it directly to an asset protection trust. Okay. So if we do set up an asset protection trust, a castle trust, we will deed the property directly to the trust. And so now the home is owned by the trust instead of you. The advantage here is that it's protected from that nursing home or Medicaid spend down. It's protected from creditors, and you can sell the property and all the proceeds would remain in the trust and would remain protected. So should a ladybird deed be in a castle trust? The answer is no. Instead, we would deed the property directly to the trust. If you have a castle trust, you would not do a ladybird deed. You would deed the property directly to the trust. You would do a ladybird deed if you have a basic revocable trust or no trust at all. All right. What is the probability of the feds raising interest rates this year as it applies towards taking a pension lump sum? Am I locked into current rates until the end of the calendar year, or does it change effect as soon as a change occurs? Ford Motor adjusts each August. So we're talking about pensions. And I'll take one step back. I'll tell you, probably 95% of people these days do not take the pension, they take the lump sum buyout. There's a variety of reasons why that is. But most people will take the lump sum buyouts rather than leaving it as a pension at the employer. They're concerned about the viability of the employer. They're concerned about the lack of flexibility. They're concerned about if I pass away or me and my spouse pass away, that it could be like $800,000 that's part of that pension is just gone. They're concerned if I were to need nursing home care, that money that's coming in is just going straight to the nursing home. They're concerned that if I take the pension from the employer, they're missing out on a better monthly or annual income by going to the private marketplace. So I would say 90, and I'm not saying that everyone should do this. Everyone's situation is a little bit different. We always try to figure out what are your goals. Let's develop best strategy and then pick the right tools. But I would say typically we're most clients and most people take the lump sum buyout at the end of the day. But that said, the question is, what is probability of feds raising interest rates? Well, they're going to have to raise interest rates at some point. They can't get much lower. So with that, I wouldn't recommend anyone really getting locked into any type of fixed things like CDs right now. Like, it's really nice for mortgages and refinancing, but on the flip side, looking at what your CDs are offering, it's pretty pitiful. Bonds are really underperforming right now. And so that's why we're looking at things like bond alternatives and getting away from CDs for your safe money. But yeah, typically once you flip on that switch, you're going to be locked in. So, and again, that's another reason why you might not want to just take the pension, is because once you make that choice, you're stuck with it, versus you roll it over to an IRA. If you want lifetime income, you can do that. You have a lot more flexibility. So yeah, especially right now, I wouldn't want to be locked into something like that. And this is the last question I have submitted. So if you do have any more questions, please make sure to submit those right now. I have a living trust, but I'd also like to protect my assets from Medicaid should it be necessary for long-term care in the future. Would a ladybird protect my 2 homes and other investment lands? All right, so quite a bit to unpack here. So we did that. So the question is, I have a living trust. All right. So, all right. So let me talk about the difference between what a revocable living trust does or a living trust does versus some other options. So let's say we're here. This is us, a woman wearing a dress. It's not me wearing a dress. We have a home, we have a second piece of property, we have our investments. So most people, when they're talking about kind of just basic estate planning, sitting down with just your basic estate planning attorney, they'll talk to you about, okay, you want to avoid probate. So that's why you set up a revocable living trust, with the idea that if you were to pass away, we make sure that the trust gets funded properly. meaning we change ownership or beneficiary to list the trust. Everything flows into the trust, and then upon death, it avoids probate. Now, the concern with this is two things. One is protection from lawsuits. So a revocable living trust or living trust does not protect you from lawsuits, creditors, bankruptcies. And then the big one, and this is what you're getting at, is the long-term care costs, which could run you $8,000 to $12,000 per month. Okay. Both of these can wipe out a revocable living trust as well as any assets in your name. Now, we do have something for your home, and a ladybird deed or your primary residence is exempt from nursing home or Medicaid spend down. So we can protect your primary residence. However, your second piece of property, any other investments would have to be sold if you need a nursing home care. So what can we do instead? Well, this is where we look to a different type of trust. This is where our asset protection trust, our castle trust, comes into play. We move assets into the trust. So your home, your second piece of property, any other investment properties, any other investments, and immediately they're protected from lawsuits. And then what it does is starts a 5-year race where if we can make it 5 years from the time we open up this trust and move the assets into the trust, then everything is protected from that nursing home or Medicaid spend down, because Medicaid looks back 5 years to see if you moved any money around. And if you have, they're going to penalize you. So if you're looking at protecting more than just your primary residence, then ladybird deeds are only going to protect your primary residence. And also understand that a ladybird deed will only protect your primary residence if you keep it as a primary residence. If you were to try to sell that, now that becomes cash and it's not protected. Versus if we were to move your primary residence, so this is your primary, if we were to move it into the trust and we decide to turn that into cash, that would remain protected inside of the trust. If you were to try to turn this into cash, well, guess what? Now that cash is going to be eaten up. So really, if you're looking at protecting assets, a ladybird deed can avoid probate and it can protect the primary residence as long as you for sure plan on keeping it as a home until you pass away. Also, as long as the home is not valued at more than $500,000, because they put a cap on what that primary residence could be valued at. So if you are concerned about nursing home and Medicaid and nursing home spend down, that's really where a lot of people look to an asset protection trust, not the revocable living trust. Revocable living trust avoids probate. You can control the distribution upon death. A castle trust does that, but then builds in asset protection. So hopefully that was helpful. All right, any other questions? I have a few minutes left, so if you do have any questions, please make sure to submit them. Otherwise, if you could just follow that link I just posted, maybe put in a nice review, let us know how we did on these, because really these are just for you, just providing education, talking about different strategies. So, all right, looks like no other. Well, thanks for very good education. My pleasure. All right. Well, with that, make it a great week. Thank you, everyone. If you want to see how any of this applies to your situation, feel free to reach out. Then again, if you could follow that link and you're feeling generous, feel free to record just like a short little 1-minute video saying, hey, this has been great. You enjoy these, that you find them educational, because a lot of things are moving to the digital world. So we want to make sure we have a good footprint and people are aware of these types of webinars and this education. So with that, thank you so much. If this was your first time, please share this with friends. The more the merrier. We had about 30 people on today, so that's really good. I appreciate all the questions. Thank you so much, and wish my daughter luck on her soccer game tonight and coaching my son tomorrow night in his last game of the season. So cross your fingers for another win. So thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye. Good luck. Thank you.